Welcome to another episode of Ask Why. And ask why what? Ask why there is injustice within society. And on behalf of the Catholic Commission for Social Justice and the Archdiocese Ministry for Migrants and Refugees, it really gives me a lot of pleasure to introduce the wonderful young lady we have before us, Miss Ruqayyah Scott. Now, before we get into our program, let me take a moment to totally fangirl Ruqayyah. Ruqayyah is a very fresh young age of 21, but my word, Ruqayyah, you have achieved so much in your very, you know, brief life, I could say. And I have a very strong suspicion that this is only just the beginning for you. Ruqayyah, thank you very much for joining us today. And before I formally introduce you, let me share with today's audience that we have invited Ruqayyah to come along to really pull apart the budget with us. You know, last week, Colm Imber presented our latest budget presentation, and we're really trying to establish, is this a budget that is geared towards the poor and vulnerable, and even the youth? Because we have to remember that we are really stewards of the community, and we are just holding the earth and passing it on to the next generation. So welcome, Ruqayyah. And let me take a moment to read your bio. Ruqayyah Scott is currently an undergraduate student at the University of West Indies, pursuing her bachelor's in science in economics with a minor in environmental economics. Passionate about leadership, economics, politics, and diplomacy, Ruqayyah has been working with many civic society and governmental organizations and youth-led entities that enable her to exercise her passion. Ruqayyah Scott is a former intern at the Health Economics Unit Center for Health Economics, UWI St. Augustine, where she delved deep into economic and social development issues across the Caribbean. She is also head trainer of the Model United Nations, club service director, and membership chair of the Rotaract Club of Central Port of Spain, former president of the UWI Economic Society, and former Trinidad and Tobago Youth Ambassador for the United States. So, audience, do you see what I mean? Ruqayyah, where do you find the time?
Well, I mean, you have to make the time, right? I think, every individual has their goals and what they want their life to look like. And so we seek those opportunities, and, we have to thank God for presenting us with those opportunities for us to really just go out there and take it. So I mean, to answer your question, I just have to make the time. There's a lot of planning, there are a lot of sacrifices, but sacrifices are needed in order for you to, reap the benefits that you want. So I tend to do that. So I plan, I sacrifice, and I make the time. I make the time.
Ruqayyah, I know you are going to do some very substantial things, not only for our society, but for this region and the world. So thank you. It always excites me to see these young people coming up, our young, bright minds. So again, thank you. And economics is such a critical topic that it's so pertinent to every day of our lives. So thank you for
Yeah.
taking the time to join us today. So let's kick off. I'm really curious as to your general impressions into what the budget presentation was like, and then we'll go into the more specifics as we carry on the
Okay.
conversation.
So, in my personal opinion, and if I may say my professional opinion, because I am not yet an economist, but I consider myself to be an economist in training, that's what I say. Um, but based on what I know, what I've seen is that we tend to in Trinidad and Tobago sort of, just renew our ideas every single year and try to work at them a little bit more. And I think that is good in the sense that if something didn't work in the past, but it's something that we want to do and can have great results, we can work towards it better. We can put more resources and so forth. But the problem is that if you keep on doing that for too long and not seeing the results, that's when we have to reevaluate. And I think with the pandemic, it gives us the perfect opportunity to reevaluate these plans and these objectives, because what's happening is that we have an implementation problem in Trinidad and Tobago. We have the great ideas, but getting them to materialize seems to be our problem. And I think that one, it's intentionally set up like that because there are political agendas that need to be fulfilled. And then secondly, it's also unintentionally set up like that because of our social infrastructure and, lack of capacity building and expertise to get certain things done. So it's a multiple dynamic that's happening with it. So how did I feel about this budget? That's how I feel about the budget. I felt as though there were a lot of ideas and policies that were just taken from previous budgets that were just mentioned and then promised to, work at them. And then for some of the new items that were announced, I can celebrate some of them, but then others I have to sit down and critique them. So some of the ones that I really like was the business support for SMEs. For example, we saw the 100% guarantee for SME loans. And there you don't need an up-to-date BIR or NIS payment required to access those loans. I love to see that the new tech startups would receive a 50% tax exemption on the first $100,000 of chargeable income for the first year and the first 200,000 of chargeable income in the second year. And I think that's really good because we don't have an income level that's way too high because we understand that it's a startup and revenue might look might be a bit less in starting out. Yes, I really like that. And I love the 5% reduction in the tax rate for SMEs whose core business is in technology solutions and digitization, because we're trying to move into that digital world, that digital economy. So this is something I can definitely support. But just our only concern with this has to be in terms of we're offering these taxes, but where are the companies? And is a tax break alone going to motivate people to start these companies? Because if you don't have the skill to do it, it's like giving a tax exemption for all makeup companies. And if I can't do makeup, the tax incentive is not necessarily going to motivate me to do that. I need to have the skill and the avenue to explore that skill. So this is something that I really liked, and plus the 50 million for professional support to SMEs, but that was included in the areas of accounting and record keeping and those sort of things, health and safety, like on the job. What about before we get into that, the support that we need before we start that business and so forth. So yeah, that's something that I really like to hear. I like to hear that Trinidad and Tobago is doing something to encourage people to purchase electric cars. But again, that's another concern that we have. So yes, there are some great things. I loved all of the incentives towards digitization and moving towards a digital economy. But then there are some other aspects that I felt that deserves a little criticism. But I know we'll get into that a bit more. But those were sort of my general views on this year's budget presentation.
Well, thank you for kicking it off there, because immediately I really want to speak about entrepreneurship, because this whole idea of digitization and bringing us into the new world of technology. Now, as you've rightly just said, all of those incentives are to stimulate small and medium business. And again, as you've rightly said, it's no point having all of these incentives and tax incentives if the skills are technically not there. But to backtrack a little bit into the idea of entrepreneurship, it's important to say at this point, especially with us looking at it through a social justice lens, this is integral human development, and a critical aspect of that is job creation, because when we work, we're looking at the dignity of the person to empower themselves, to be able to sustain themselves in their daily life. Now, the issue with this is we are in the midst of a COVID pandemic, and it's been widely reported that it said that as things are opening back up, over 6,000 of our small and medium-sized businesses didn't open back up. So the reality is we've had a shrinkage of the economy. Now, in your opinion, again, it sounds nice and it's really wonderful to report to our global partners and our banks, etc., that we're working towards a digital economy. But if there are deficits, is the solution, to your mind, skill sharing? Because as we've said, there are gaps in our knowledge base. So, and last week we had a really great discussion with Gillian Goddard from the Alliance of Rural Communities, and this is how she started her business, her agricultural business. They went into it knowing that they had a nice model that they could share at a community level, and they shared it. But they also learned, and as such, they were able to stimulate these little micro community industries, and now they're going regional and global. So that's a really positive thing to outlook to put forward. But what are the gaps, to having this digital economy? And again, to bring up your point with regards to the cars, it's a nice thing to say that we're going to some sort of zero carbon emission and the government is doing these things. But I actually, for you as a young person, what's going to be your driver when you make a decision to purchase a car?
So for me, if I'm looking at purchasing a car, the main factor really is the cost of the vehicle. And the reality of it is that an electric car is not the most affordable to someone like me. I'm a full-time student. I don't have a full-time job that gives me a steady income. So that money that I'll have to be purchasing the car, it has to be from my savings, my allowance, or any gigs that I get to the side. So an electric car is definitely not going to be the first one, especially because there's infrastructural changes that need to come with purchasing an electric car. You need to set up that bank where you have to charge the vehicle and so forth. And that might be an additional expense because that is using some form of energy as well to charge your vehicle. So that, of course, is going to present some, challenges, but it is going to benefit the rich. And I understand that we do have members of our society who work really hard and they are able to accumulate wealth over time. And we shouldn't ever try to take that away from persons. But what we have to remember is that as you earn more, someone else is earning less. The more you have, the less someone else has as well. And the problem with wealth accumulation is that a lot of the times that wealth is just sitting there doing nothing. It's not collecting interest. It's not, going into businesses. If it's going into an investment, going into a business, it's creating jobs, you understand? If it's going into the stock markets, it is contributing to the success of a company, and that company can grow and employ more persons and that sort of thing. But if you just have money that's just lying down there doing nothing, it's kind of counterproductive. And the persons who have this amount of wealth can pretty much get by in anything in life. They can afford to go to a better school. They can afford the best healthcare. They can afford insurance. They can afford to buy a home, buy the clothes that they want, the plane tickets that they have. And then we have to look at the spectrum of people who cannot afford that. There are some people in Trinidad and Tobago who cannot afford to pay their rent. They cannot afford to pay their mortgages. They cannot afford to eat. Their families that are skipping meals. They're not eating breakfast and just eating lunch and dinner, or some variation of that. There are students. I when I'm driving sometimes on the road and you look at fruit stalls, sometimes you see it's 12 o'clock in the day and you're seeing young people and you're wondering why they're not in school. And sometimes, and I'm speaking from personal experience, you ask and they say it's because they don't have a device to go to school. So we have to keep in mind that while, yes, if this tax exemption on the electric cars are going to impact the 250 rich families in Trinidad and Tobago, that's just an arbitrary number. So that means, okay, 250 electric cars, we're starting, but we also have to think about the poor and vulnerable. How are we equipping them with the ability for them to make enough money to purchase an electric car? We're not asking for, electric cars to significantly decrease in price, because we understand that that's not something that can be done immediately, and that with an increase in demand, it will eventually, the price will fall. But we have to think about are our policies targeted towards everyone or 250 families out of the 1.4 million people that we have in Trinidad and Tobago. So that is my take on the electric cars. I do support it in the sense that it is going to encourage at least some form of moving away from the gasoline into electric cars, and that is going to save us a lot. But in the same vein, that really just targets one group in our society. It completely excludes me. And I fit into many categories. I'm young, I'm a woman, I am a student. And then when you have to do these statistics of that, then you think about how it's going to reflect later on internationally, it doesn't necessarily have that impact. So I support it, yes, but I would love to see more sustainable, environmentally friendly things that can be implemented where I can also partake. And of course, the poor and vulnerable can also partake.
That is an excellent answer. And you've highlighted two things that I'd really like to kind of delve into right now. Food sustainability. Food security was all over this budget. Incentives to encourage people to get into agriculture, to grow their own. I mean, as you know, our import bills are extraordinarily high. So
Yeah.
please comment on this.
So this is where I think we may have lost a lack of foresight, a lack of consultancy and planning, because the thing about food security is we need to be able to produce the amount that we need to survive, right? And perhaps in abundance as well. And if we're not doing that, then of course we're in a serious problem. So we fill that gap with imports. The thing with it is you cannot produce everything that you need to consume. That will be bad economics. It just makes sense to import things that you cannot produce yourselves, because there's certain things that our climate does not provide for us to grow here. But then with technology, we see that we can grow almost anything. So which is why we would love to see more investment into agricultural technology to ensure that we can produce. But in the meantime, it is still going to be very expensive. So that's why I understand that there are some things that we need to import. But with that being said, I think what we can do is ensure that the content of what we're importing can have benefits in our society. So in my bio, everyone knows that I was an intern at the health economics unit. So we looked at health economics in the region. And what we notice is that we eat very unhealthy. There are things that we consume, like cheese, that we think is healthy. It's normal bread and cheese. Every morning there's cheese and something. We put cheese into our meals. Cheese is not something that's very healthy, and it may have benefits to you, but overall it's not a very healthy thing to eat. And we don't necessarily produce cheese in Trinidad and Tobago. It's something that we import, and it's relatively cheap to import as well. So given that, I see that the government wants to increase food security, and they want to lower our food import bill, but yet there's a removal of VAT on items such as ketchup, canned beans, canned fish, canned meat, biscuits, and so forth. And those things are incredibly high in sugar and incredibly high in salt, and they're imported. We don't produce ketchup here. We don't produce canned meat and those sorts of things. So you want to decrease the import bill, but then you remove taxes on things that are imported. And if you remove the taxes, it's cheaper. So then the import bill is going to rise. So you understand what I'm saying in terms of like, there's a lack of coordinated foresight with what is it that we're really trying to achieve, you know? So that's what it is. And I think we should take into consideration social planning when we're looking at the economy. Do we want a healthier population? Because with COVID-19, we've actually seen that the persons who succumb to the virus are persons with comorbidities for the most part. We're talking about diabetes, hypertension, heart disease. I know if I could count how many people I know with diabetes, I would be out of fingers and toes. So do we want a healthier population? If we want a healthier population, then we need to ensure that we kind of incentivize them to eat healthier. And removing that on canned sausages is not going to help. That's processed meat. It is high in salt. It is preserved. It's not healthy. So for me, it's kind of like I would have preferred to see some healthier items, have that no tax. And if we're talking about, food security, of course, I support all of the initiatives. I think the only problem, which is not necessarily the fault of the government, is that we don't really have people who have the interest in getting into agriculture as well, because there is still that stigma that agriculture is not, a prestigious job, and that's changing. It's changing slowly. People are starting to wake up and realize that that's incorrect, and the one industry that's never going to die is agriculture. So I do believe that in the very near future, we will see more people getting into agriculture and taking advantages of these provisions that are being made by the government. And hopefully we can see through that the production of more fruits and vegetables and livestock that we can see become part of our society, where we don't have to depend on our imports. I mean, if we can make ketchup here and make it cheaper than what it is to import, then that would be great. It would be great, although it's still not healthy. I feel very passionately about the healthy eating part, because what you consume inside of your body, it shows tremendously on your health and your well-being in the long run. And a healthy nation is a wealthy nation. So that should definitely be our focus.
Amen. That sounds like Dr. Allen. Yes, indeed. Now, to kind of to support what you're saying there, I mean, in the recent years, we've actually seen the organic generation of green markets, of the agro industry and little kind of artisan crafts and whatnot popping up organically. And certainly from an economic perspective, buy local, produce local, these sorts of things, it's already happening. So
yeah, it is. Like just the other day, someone mentioned that there's Dasheen cereal, like Dasheen cornflakes. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is brilliant.
That's innovative.
That is, and I've actually had wine made from peas, I think, locally grown green peas. I've had wine from it. So, and that's the thing, Trinidad and Tobago does not have a shortage of talent, of skill. But what we do have is that lack of opportunity to develop that into something that can be fruitful, that can, provide jobs, and not just any job, but sustainable jobs, because you cannot be employed for 6 months and then what are you going to do for the rest of your life? So sustainable job creation has to be supported with the opportunity to make all of these little ventures, full-fledged businesses that are successful and that are here for a long period of time, that can provide jobs and pay taxes and contribute to the betterment of our society.
And I love the idea of these little micro industries developing, because very importantly, they put money in the hands of women who, really, we have a situation where we have a lot of single parent households, and there is a very real struggle there, especially in the time of COVID-19, where women and the job losses within the domestic worker market, or even just the laborer. We're seeing this, and the reality is, and to go back to COVID-19, we're now in a situation where children are at home, they need support, and they don't have it. So that is, I have to say, there's one positive thing that seemed to come out of the budget, that the government was trying to put tablets and Wi-Fi hotspot devices into the hands of children and needy households. Could you expand on that?
So that in itself is great, but again, comes down to the implementation. You cannot take 6 months to put tablets into children's hands, because by then the term is over. And same thing for the Wi-Fi. This was actually an initiative that was mentioned in the last year's budget. And I don't understand how it takes over 1 year to put Wi-Fi into all of the schools. I mean, if I try to get Wi-Fi for my home, they come and do it in 2 days and it's done, So again, it's implementation. So I do support this. I think it's a great move, especially you need the internet for so many things. We're not relying on textbooks and stuff anymore. So we really need the internet to kind of stimulate those types of critical thinking in schools. So I do support this, and I really hope to see it implemented. I really don't want to hear it in the budget next year. I want to see it accomplished this year. And I just want to see upgrades year after year.
Well, Ruqayyah, I'm a mother of 2, and I'm hoping in the next 6 months, my kids will be back out to school on a permanent basis. And even to be a voice for another segmented aspect of society, mothers who have children with special needs. Not every child is going to be able to learn off of a screen.
Exactly. And I think our education system needs to be tailored towards the different needs of our students, and not just needs in terms of your interests. whether it be math or English or arts or whatever, but in terms of our physical, biological health needs as well. We really need to focus there, because I don't think our education is tailored that way, our education system, because most likely, if you do have a child who has a need for special care, you have to access that through private means. And then that could be very expensive. And what if you're in a situation where, you are the only parent that's present in the child's life, or you may have both parents, but you are the one who is looking after the kids financially, then that becomes another concern. So this is where a tool, gender responsive budgeting, comes into key here, where you look at it through a gender lens and look at how everything is going to affect men, women, boys, and girls. It looks at intersectionality. So you're looking at women, men, boys, and girls in different socioeconomic positions. You look at them in terms of race, religion, health, and all of these things, because an East Indian single mother in Trinidad and Tobago will be affected very differently from an African single mother in Trinidad and Tobago. And it's just the reality of the times that we live in. Someone who may belong to the Catholic faith may have a different experience than someone who belongs to the Islamic faith as well. So all of these things that we need to be very cognizant of how our society is going to react. And that's why it really is very applicable to apply a gender lens to the budget, so that when we're looking at a policy, let's say we're talking about the housing policy, that's for example, and we're looking at the removal of stamp duties for first-time homeowners for up to $2 million. I think that is excellent. Why? Because a lot of first-time homeowners are young people. They may be single parents who would have left a marriage and would have had to leave that home and may now have to purchase another home. So in that way, you can see how a policy like that can actually trickle down and benefit every woman, benefit every man, benefit them in a particular age group, benefit them regardless of what socioeconomic background they come from. Because with first-time home ownership, even if you have the means or you don't, you still get to benefit from that. So it's cross-sectional like that. So that's why we really have to think about our policies in terms of its intersectionality. How is it going to affect everyone? But directly to your question, I think I would like to see something in our public education system that caters towards special needs of children, because it's just simply not fair that in order for them to be a part of our society, you have to access that elsewhere, as if you're some other part of our society and not, with everyone. I don't like that line of thinking at all. I don't like it at all. And I know how many people would have had learning disabilities, for example, dyslexia, who would have really had to struggle in a public education system to be successful and to feel, as we like to say, normal. Though what is normal? Everyone is different. Everyone is different. Everyone has those quirks. Everyone has their issues, and I mean that's just real life. So definitely need to see that in our education system. I think we're way too far in this to not have that be a consideration. I would hate for us to exit this pandemic in the same position that we were in prior to the pandemic, and to me it looks very much the same. But that's something that we should pay attention, because the world is moving at a very fast pace, and there are lots of things happening, and we don't want Trinidad and Tobago to be left behind.
Thank you for saying that, because that was actually going to be my next question. Are we keeping up with global trends and activities? And to support what you had just said, if children are given the right support, for example, our own Archbishop, Charles Jason Gordon, is dyslexic and very open about it, but he had good support and he was able to achieve at a very high level. He is the Archbishop of Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados. So again, it really is about your support systems and ensuring that our systemic structures do give all the best opportunity possible. So speaking of that, it seemed to me, and this is a particularly pertinent point to you directly as a voice for young people. When I was looking at and going back to this idea of job opportunities, they actually said the government is freezing the filling of all vacancies in the public service for a year and considering extending the retirement age to 65. So what does that
Yeah.
mean for young people?
Well, it definitely means, less job opportunities in the public sector. Um, but it does not necessarily mean less job opportunities in the private sector. It can be a motivation for us to start our own businesses or to look outside for employment. But I guess the whole idea is that we don't want a brain drain. We want to keep our young people here and so forth. So that's why I say sometimes it's really hard for me to listen to a politician and really say, yes, I support that, because I wonder where is your mind really at? Because if you're increasing the age from 60 to 65, I am sure there are a lot of older persons who are going to be happy about that, perhaps because they may not want to move from a $10,000 salary to now $3,000 a month, and they may have bills to pay. I mean, it's not just young people alone who have mortgages to pay. There are some people who would have taken out a mortgage at 40 years old, 50 years old, and still have it for 20. And while we may think that's not a reality, I know of people who would have started a mortgage in their 50s and have 20 years to pay it off. So it's not about, progressing one group of people. I'm not saying that we have to put young people above everybody else, but what we're saying is that it needs to be equitable. So if we're creating more opportunities for our elderly, we need to also create more opportunities for our young people. And I don't think this particular policy is doing that in any sense. But we will see. It doesn't really help us much. It really doesn't. It really doesn't.
I have to say, coming out of this budget, it feels as though the conversation around it was very minimal almost, you know?
Yes, yes. And I'll tell
Why?
you why. It's
Thank you.
because 70% of what was announced in the budget have been things we've heard of before, and the overall budget was very much focused on keeping the economy stable, which is important. The economy has to be stable in order for it to grow. But there were no measures that were announced that is like, OMG, yes, this is going to completely pivot Trinidad and Tobago. So that's why there's not really been much conversation about it, because there's simply just not much to talk about. We've heard a lot of the things before, the Wi-Fi, the National Statistical Institute. We've heard a lot of this tax breaks and tax removals. They just switch every year from one industry to another industry. There's more taxes here, less taxes there. So there's nothing really to talk about. I mean, we had the formation of the Ministry of Digital Transformation and whatever that very nice title says. But what have we really seen? I mean, up to this day, some of the banks still want a physical signature.
Yeah.
And these are banks, these are private. So I don't necessarily, that's why there's not been much conversation about it, because, economists in the field as well have been really searching for things to say, because there's just not much to say at this budget. I mean, it sounded really well, and when you just look at the highlights, but when you have to break them down and see how it's going to affect the average man and woman, that's where you kind of see the fault lines.
Yeah. And the reality is we still don't know what the world is going to look like coming out of COVID-19.
And we don't even know when that's going to be, because the virus is mutating. There are so many variants.
Yeah.
There have been research articles published about the efficacy of the vaccines changing over time, and so forth. And so there's a lot to consider. We have these vaccines that are available to us. I would really like to see more education to encourage people to take the vaccines. I mean, I am in a position that I consider myself blessed in the sense that I could, read and decipher easily, and then I went to take my vaccine. So I am fully vaccinated, and I was able to encourage my immediate family to do that. But not everybody may have those same competency, skills, or access to that type of knowledge as well, because as we know with social media, whatever you search is most likely what they're going to keep feeding you. So if you search one anti-vax thing, it's most likely going to be feeding you that information as well. So ramping up information on the vaccines, I think, is something that we should focus on. So at least we can see our way out of the regular COVID variants for now, and then see what happens after and whatever happens. But I don't see COVID-19 being something of the past until at least for a couple of years. I really don't. I mean, some people have been hopeful and they say that, they think in a year or two, but we'll see. I still think that there's much for us to observe, but in that observation, we have to realize that COVID-19 gives us such an excellent opportunity to slow down and reevaluate so many things, which is why I really hope to see that our government would be take a bit more risk, a little bit more willpower, in this. I mean, I know it's not an easy job, but a lot of the times you need to just take that jump. I mean, I have had, lecturers who are much senior in their 70s and so forth say that back in the day when the highway was just one lane on each side, when they were going to introduce more than one, people were like, oh my gosh, no, it'll have too many cars on the road, it'll have a set of traffic. And that's become such part of our normal fabric of our society. So yes, new ideas get a lot of pushback, but they're needed. We really need we need to be risk takers. We need to be entrepreneurs with Trinidad and Tobago, essentially. We need our government to be like, all right, this is our smart new idea. This is what we're doing. We're taking a leap, we're taking a jump for it, because we need to be moving in a direction. And sadly, we're not there as yet.
You know what, though? I think this is the perfect time to wrap up this conversation, because as usual, we've run out of time. But I like the idea of ending it on that note, because yes, we need to be risk takers. And thank you, Ruqayyah, because you have totally inspired me to go brave into this new world. And the truth is, we don't know what this world is going to look like in a few years. But we do know that we have so much talent and creativity right here in TNT. And it's those things that stimulate an economy. We just really need a skill base right now to help people bring those ideas to market, so that we can be thriving communities, all hustling and bustling. So, Ruqayyah, thank you so much. It was a pleasure interviewing you today, and we hope to have you back very soon, because we want to continue this discussion around, the economy and how best we can empower all within society. So thank you so much. And on behalf of the Catholic Commission for Social Justice, please enjoy your evening, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
As we approach World Day of the Poor on November 14th, Pope Francis reminds us of Christ's message, "The poor you will always have with you." Mark chapter 14, verse 7. In these times, we are called to encounter Christ through the poor and vulnerable. The Catholic Commission for Social Justice and the Archdiocese Ministry for Migrants and Refugees would like to encourage the wider society to reach out to the most vulnerable through acts of mercy.
What are acts of mercy? According to the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, the corporal works of mercy are found in the teachings of Jesus and give us a model for how we should treat all others as if they were Christ in disguise. Acts of mercy are charitable actions by which we help our neighbors in their bodily needs. They respond to the basic needs of humanity as we journey together through this life. There are 7 corporal works of mercy. Number 1, feed the hungry. There are many people in this world who go without food. When so much of our food goes to waste, consider how good stewardship practices of your own food habits can benefit others who do not have the same resources. Having delicious food at Christmas? Donate to a Christmas food drive so everyone can have something to eat. Research, identify, and contribute financially to organizations that serve the hungry, such as the Catholic community within Trinidad and Tobago. The next time you make a recipe that can be easily frozen, make double batch and donate one to your local food pantry or soup kitchen. Number 2, give drink to the thirsty. Many of our brothers and sisters do not have access to clean water and suffer from the lack of this basic necessity. We should support the efforts of those working towards greater accessibility of this essential resource. Make an effort not to waste water, remembering to turn off the tap when you are brushing your teeth or washing dishes. Number 3. Shelter the homeless. There are many circumstances that could lead to someone becoming a person without a home. Christ encourages us to go out and meet those without homes, affirming their worth and helping them seek a resolution to the challenges they face. See if your parish or diocese is involved with local homeless shelters and volunteer some time. Donate time or money to organizations that build homes for those in need of shelter. Many homeless shelters need necessities such as warm beds and blankets. If you can donate mattresses, clothes, and other resources, it can go a long way. There are millions of children and families who are on the move, fleeing from war, illness, hunger, and impossible living conditions, and searching for peace and safety. Engage parish groups of children, youth, young adults, and families in doing some research on the causes and challenges that these families face to survive. Contact your local parish outreach and find out how the Archdiocese Ministry for Migrants and Refugees is serving the migrant community near you. Number 4. Visit the sick. Those who are sick are often forgotten or avoided, especially in the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. In spite of their illness, these individuals still have much to offer to those who take the time to visit and comfort them. Give blood. Spend time volunteering at a nursing home. Take time on a Saturday to stop and visit with an elderly neighbor. Offer to assist caregivers of chronically sick family members, one at a time or over a periodic basis. Give caregivers some time off from their caregiving responsibilities so that they too can rest. Next time you make a meal that can be easily frozen, again, make double batch and give it to a family in your parish who has a sick loved one. Number 5. Visit the prisoners. People in prison are still people, made in the image and likeness of God. No matter what someone has done, they deserve the opportunity to hear the word of God. Number 6. Bury the dead. Funerals give us the opportunity to grieve and show others support during difficult times. Through our prayers and actions during these times, we show our respect for life, which is always a gift from God, and comfort those who mourn. Send a greeting card to somebody who has recently lost a loved one. If you cannot afford it in these times, make your own, or reach out electronically, making sure that that person knows you are thinking of them always. Visit the cemetery for somebody that you have lost. Spend time planning your own funeral mass, read through the order of Christian funerals, and find hope in the resurrection. Number 7. Give alms to the poor. Donate money to organizations that have the ability to provide support and services for those in need. Research and find organizations that put people in need first rather than profit. Skip that morning coffee and put that money in the collection basket at church. Find a charity that is meaningful to you, such as St. Vincent de Paul or Living Waters, or even your own local parish, and volunteer your time and money. These are the 7 corporal works of mercy. This season of Justice, Peace and Community and World Day of the Poor, thank you for joining the Catholic Commission for Social Justice as we educate the wider population as to how we can all give back and contribute to the benefit of all in these times. Thank you.